All right, so one of the greatest, what I'll say, should I say one of the greatest disappointments in the history of tech, but I think that would just be a very, very interesting statement. Anyways, welcome to this channel. Welcome to All Things Blockchain. Today I want to talk about a story that's very, very important in technology, in the history of technology, in the history of the internet, and talking about some of the great inventors. Now, we know people like Steve Jobs, we know currently people like Elon Musk, on social media age, people like Jack Dorsey or Mark Zuckerberg, but there's someone that a lot of people don't know about, and he's someone that arguably could have been the Bill Gates, or could have kind of had the success that Bill Gates had. Obviously, in the early 70s or early 80s, with the rise of the personal computer, everybody knows Microsoft, everybody knows Bill Gates. But before Bill Gates, or around that era, there's a guy who is really unknown, and that's a guy by the name of Gary Kildall. I want to talk to you about that story, about the story of Gary Kildall, and why that's really important in the information age, and why you should know that story. So in the early 1970s, there was a guy by the name of Gary Kildall, who you could say was one of the first people to discover that microprocessors are kind of like mini computers. So back then, when you had the Apple Mac that was developed early in the 1970s, it was one of the very first, or the Apple One, excuse me, one of the very first personal computers. And now it had its own OS, its own software that ran on it. Now, if any other company was trying to get into that age of the personal computer, that space, that would have meant was every single company would have had to create its own operating system. So imagine having so many cars, like you have your Toyota, you have your Honda, and every car uses its own fuel. That don't have made sense, right? Obviously. But now you have fuel that all cars use the same gas, quote unquote. You don't have to buy gas that's specific for Toyotas, gas that's specific for different brands of cars. And that's how the internet was, or the PC market was early in the days. Apple was the first company in the market, and they had their own OS, and other players were trying to develop similar products, but will have meant having different OSs for different computers, which will have just been very chaotic. Welcome, Gary Kildall. Now, Gary Kildall came up with a very unique idea to come up with an operating system that could run on pretty much any platform. So you could have operating systems whereby I won't have to write new software for different systems. So the idea came from Gary Kildall. Now, when Apple was inside the personal computer market and they saw a lot of success in that area, IBM was building big mainframes, and they weren't really interested in the PC market until they saw what Apple was doing in the early 1970s. So IBM was trying to get to market as quickly as possible. Like everyone knew IBM, they used to have these big mainframes that computers people would buy, but they just didn't see any profit or any need to enter the personal computer market until they saw the success of Apple. And so because they were trying to get into the market as quickly as possible, they were trying to develop an operating system that they could use off the shelf and buy off the shelf products so that they could make it into that PC market as quick as possible here. And they walked up to Bill Gates. I said, hey, by then Microsoft was still an upcoming company, and they didn't have that OS that IBM was looking for. Well, they signed a non-disclosure agreement with Bill Gates so that they could explain to him what they were trying to do, which was to enter the PC market. Bill was like, look, I don't have this application, I don't have this software, but I know somebody who does have it, and that's Gary Kildall. Gary Kildall was running a company called Digital Research, and he had this operating system called CP/M. Now, CP/M was the OS I talked about that could run pretty much that could speak to microprocessors at a very low level, and you could use that to build different kinds of PCs and run software on it. I'm saying that at a high level, forgive me if I don't go into little details. Anyways, and so he directed IBM to Gary Kildall. Now, Gary was out of town, and so they met Gary's wife. And he asked Gary's wife, I think her name was Deborah, to sign the same non-disclosure agreement that Bill Gates signed, explaining that, look, we can't give you details of what we're trying to do until you sign this NDA. Back and forth between Gary's wife and IBM, they left very frustrated, and they went back to Bill Gates and said, look, Bill, build this for us. And that's where Bill said, okay, I will be able to build it. And what he did then, you could say it was interesting, you could question what he did, was he bought what we call an OS called a QDOS, which is called Quick and Dirty Operating System, for $50,000 from some programmer somewhere. QDOS arguably was actually a ripoff or a fabrication, I don't use that word, or a modification of Gary Kildall's CP/M operating system software. And so there was a lot of back and forth between, and so when IBM went public, and when IBM built their mainframe computer or their personal computers, and they had the MS-DOS, which was QDOS that Bill Gates acquired, and he renamed it as MS-DOS, which you all know, the Microsoft Disk Operating System. Gary Kildall was at this huge legal battle with IBM, and because IBM didn't want to go into all that mess, they decided to release their personal computer and have MS-DOS and CP/M available for everybody to buy. Now here it is. When IBM went public with their personal computer, because of their notoriety, they were beating Apple in terms of sales. And so because MS-DOS became very popular, Gary Kildall felt that, hey, this is kind of like a ripoff of my software. He was really vocal about it, and he had a chance, quote unquote. He missed his first chance because his wife didn't sign his NDA, arguably, and they didn't get the initial contract to build the OS, but he had his chance. He came again. You could say that life came full circle. Well, IBM said, okay, we'll sell our personal computer and we'll put both applications available. We'll put MS-DOS and CP/M, which was Gary Kildall's software. MS-DOS from Microsoft, CP/M from Gary Kildall, and let everyone choose, let the markets choose. And this was Gary Kildall's second mistake. First, he didn't sign the NDA and chased away IBM and allowed them to go to Microsoft. Second mistake that he made was that he priced CP/M almost 10 times the price of MS-DOS. Now look at that, I'm a consumer. I buy a PC from IBM and I have two operating systems I can use. Either I use MS-DOS or I use CP/M, and they both do the same thing from a consumer perspective. At a lower level, there are some things that CP/M could do, but from a user, like, why would I pay so much for this? And that's where Gary lost the battle once again, because obviously everybody went to MS-DOS and nobody bought CP/M. And I think that's when Gary just said, he left it alone and said he wasn't going to pursue that any longer. And we all know the rest is history. We know how eventually MS-DOS became from Microsoft, this operating system, and then eventually they built Windows, and that's another discussion for another day. Arguably, you could say they ripped off Apple, or maybe not ripped off, or they I don't want to use the word stole, they adopted the concept of Windows from work that was done by another engineer by the name of Douglas Engelbart out of the Palo Alto Research Center, which is another story for another day. So why is this important? The most important thing is the opportunity. Just look at that. You can look at Bill Gates and you can say what you want to say about him, but he was a great businessman. He saw an opportunity and he was ready for the opportunity when it came. He accepted the offer from IBM and said, look, I will build this, even though he didn't necessarily have the tools or have the operating system or the software that IBM had, but he figured out a way to build it. I feel like the generation of the internet has gone in different phases. First of all, you had the personal computer age, and you have the social media age. And this is why I'm saying this and sharing why this is very important, is we're living in the next iteration of the internet, which is the blockchain cryptocurrencies phase. I truly believe that. Bitcoin is the internet of money, and blockchain technology is going to change a lot. And this is the opportunity. I don't know when you're watching this video, but if you're watching it sometime in 2021, then you're welcome to the age of the next iteration. And to me, I feel as if there are so many, sorry to say this, Gary Kildalls out there who are witnessing this great revolution, this great opportunity, and in some ways are not taking advantage of it. So I always say that. I look at all those stories, my heart breaks to that, to what happened to Gary. And the sad story about that, about Gary Kildall, is at the end, from what I've read, forgive me if I don't get the information right, he actually died. He died in a bar fight. It was some bar fight over, I don't know what it was, what argument was about, and he died in a fight. The guy who invented the operating system, the layer behind MS-DOS, which eventually became Windows, and Microsoft became a multi-billion-dollar company, and a lot of people don't even know who Gary Kildall is. Very, very sad story. We are living in a different age, and I hope we all take advantage and learn from this story. It's a sad story, but it's what drives me every day. That is, opportunities are everywhere. Let's take advantage of the fact that we are in the next generation of the internet, which is the internet of money, which is the blockchain Bitcoin revolution. Do not miss this train, because I believe that 5-10 years from now, a lot of us look back and say, yeah, I was there when I heard about Bitcoin, heard about Ethereum, heard about cryptocurrencies so many years ago, but I did not take advantage. Our kids are going to ask us, where were you? I mean, people look back and say, of course, if I was there during the internet age, I would have taken advantage of it, but you might not have, because you're not taking advantage of this current age, which is the age of crypto. Or you could argue and say, yeah, if I was there when Twitter and Facebook was evolving, I would have taken advantage of that. I heard about Jack Ma and his business, which is Alibaba. When he first showed people, a lot of people laughed at him. But you can look now and say, hey, if I was there then, I'm sure I would have taken advantage of that. But you probably won't, because you're not even taking advantage of what's right in front of us today, which is the crypto age. Don't be the Gary Kildall of the crypto age. Learn as much as you can about blockchain technology. Learn as much as you can about distributed ledgers, because I really believe that this environment, I believe that this technology is going to change the world. So I hope you got something out of this. Until next time, like I always like to say, my wish for you is that you learn how to code. Because coding is changing and will change the world, especially in this blockchain distributed ledger technology space. And it is my personal opinion that those who get involved will greatly impact the future. And if that's you, then let's go change the world.
If you would like to create more awareness for your brand or content, or you would like to earn additional income, register now on www.Kleeky.com. The more you share, the more you earn. Kleeky.